Canada and the United States should be about as safe a trading relationship as you could imagine, right? They're long-standing allies, their economies are deeply integrated, and they even have a formal trade agreement, USMCA. And yet the US has just imposed 50% tariffs on around 20 billion of selected Canadian exports. And Canada is retaliating dollar for dollar. And some of those tariffs apply even to goods that qualify under USMCA. So this is about much, much more than Canada. If you run an international business and you want to understand what developments like these ones mean for strategy and for growth, then subscribe to the channel. That's where we unpack these sorts of things. Now, there are three things I think businesses should take from this latest episode. Firstly, political risk can appear in places we traditionally think of as safe. Think about the US and Canada. Traditionally, they've had a very low-risk relationship. They are long-standing allies. They have a giant shared border of 9,000 kilometres. They're members of USMCA. They have deeply integrated supply chains, and businesses have built long-term assumptions around stability. But now we have 50% tariffs and Canadian retaliation. The point isn't that Canada or the US has suddenly become a really dangerous market. It's that political risk can change much faster than a company's strategy and ability to catch up. Now, secondly, a trade agreement isn't a guarantee. The Trump administration is using Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930, which allows tariffs of up to 50% in response to what it considers discriminatory treatment of US commerce. And these tariffs can apply even to products that should qualify under USMCA. We've seen a version of this right here in Australia. So think about the Australia-China trading relationship. We have CHAFTA, our trade agreement with China since 2015, and China is Australia's biggest trading partner. We send them 40% of our exports and they supply about 27% of ours. But in 2020, the political relationship went south during COVID, and China put tariffs on wine, barley, lobster, coal, and a bunch of other commodities. The FTA stayed, but the commercial reality was drastically different. Now, of course, the circumstances between the US and Canada are different. Canada and the US have a much more integrated trading relationship. Canada sends 70% of exports to the US, and Canada and the US are geographically close, whereas Australia and China are far apart. But the lesson here is the same. Trade agreements reduce barriers, but they don't remove political risk. And thirdly, concentration makes the damage worse. As I said, Canada sends nearly 70% of its exports to the States. That makes commercial sense. The US is enormous and close and deeply integrated with Canada, but it also creates dependence. Now, Australia learned this during the China dispute. Some sectors that I mentioned, wine, barley, rock lobster, were heavily dependent on China. When the access changed, people had to scramble to diversify. Replacing a huge market takes time. New customers, distributors, pricing, and logistics all take time to organize. And so diversification is something you build before you need it. So I think the question for international business isn't simply, is this a safe market for us? It's which assumptions does our current strategy depend on? And what happens if one of them suddenly changes? And if you're reviewing your own international growth strategy, I've linked our blueprint for international success in the comments below.